Tonight we step into the shadowy tree line of a forest so dense the stars barely peek through, and yet beyond it, the world changes. You march with fur around your shoulders, your breath a ghost in the air, the soil wet beneath your leather sandals, or maybe just your bare feet. You've never seen stonework like that before, and certainly not arches that don't fall down. Past the rivers that hissed with Roman patrols, past the merchants with bronze scales, lies something you cannot unsee, a place where roads do not disappear into mud, where water flows from lions' mouths, where people eat olives by choice. You've crossed from Germania into the Roman world, and trust me, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know your location and what time it is where you're listening. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge along behind your chieftain, one of many from a patchwork of tribes, Cherushi Markamani, chatty Vandals, whose names mostly sound like tavern drink, specials now, but once sent shivers down Roman spines. Your people don't have roads, but you have paths. You don't have a senate, but your elders argue plenty. And while Rome might call your kind barbari, your language has rhythm, your gods are loud, and your loyalty to kin runs deeper than any aqueduct. Still, curiosity pulls. Rome is not just a neighbor, it's a magnet. A few centuries earlier, things weren't so cozy. Back then, Rome had a habit of marching into your forests with shiny eagles, demanding taxes and obedience. Remember, Varus, the Roman general who brought 3 legions into the Teutoburg forest and never made it out. Let's just say you and your buddies left quite an impression. Roman historians claim your ancestors strung up heads and nailed Roman standards to trees. Historians still argue whether Arminius, the Roman-trained Germanic commander who led the ambush, was a freedom fighter or a cunning opportunist. Either way, Varus lost his head both figuratively and literally. But as the centuries wear on, something shifts. You see, Rome starts changing, not all at once, but like a villa roof sagging in slow motion. It grows decadent, overstretched, and yes, a little lazy. Meanwhile, Germanic tribes, once scattered and squabbling, begin watching and learning. Some tribes make deals, others raid when grain runs low. Some do both in the same week. You see, invasion and immigration were not mutually exclusive concepts. By the 3rd century, Rome's borders pulse with movement. You might find yourself camped near the Danube, staring across at a Roman fort with better food than you've ever smelled. Some of your cousins have already slipped inside, selling furs, renting their swords, maybe marrying a local. At night you hear the oddest thing, a Roman flute playing in the dark. One of your own plays it. He traded for it last market. Sounds like wind trapped in a wine jar, he says, grinning. You try not to show it, but part of you wants what they have, not just their amphorae or armor, but their sheer confidence. They've got gods with marble faces and law codes that even the emperor has to pretend to follow. Meanwhile, you've still got tribal meetings under oak trees and feasts that end in wrestling. Of course, theirs end in poisonings and coups, so not all that glitters. Still, it begins, the first trickle. Germanic individuals, then families, then whole tribal groups begin migrating, not always with permission, not always peacefully, but they come. Some as mercenaries, some as settlers, some as conquerors in denial. You walk into Roman towns and see graffiti in Latin that says things like, "The baths are better than wives." You don't really get it, but you laugh anyway. You walk past statues that have lost noses and wear cloaks that once belonged to Roman cavalrymen. One guy in your band even pretends to be Roman on market days. He slicks back his hair and tries to say salve without choking. And so begins the long, strange relationship between the Germanic world and Rome. You, once the wild-haired menace in the forest, are now a visitor, but not just passing through. And somewhere along the way, perhaps when the first chieftain gets his hands on a Roman seal ring, or the first tribal warlord starts minting coins, you realize you're not just looking at Rome anymore, you're becoming part of it. Or maybe it's becoming part of you. Either way, one thing's clear: the guests have arrived, and you're not going home anytime soon. You wake up to the scent of strange spices. Not the smoked boar you're used to, nor the wild garlic you collect by the stream, but something richer, like meat rolled in flowers. You're in a Roman trading outpost now, your fur cloak sticking out among the tunics, your boots heavier than the sandals around you. The Danube murmurs nearby, and on the far bank, Roman banners ripple like silent warnings. But today, it's not war. Today, it's commerce. Your tribe brought amber, golden, honey-like precious to the Romans, who believe it traps sunlight. You offer bear pelts and salted elk meat, and in return, Roman merchants hand over bolts of dyed cloth and silver coins, stamped with the emperor's worried face. You don't know his name. Frankly, most Romans barely know their emperors anymore either. There's been 4 this year alone, and it's only summer. Trade becomes a habit. At first, it's occasional with wary guards watching. Then more tribes arrive, each with something to barter. Some bring slaves, usually unlucky neighbors. Others come with their families, hoping to settle under Roman protection. It's not long before these deals start resembling something bigger than markets. Land for service deals, cross-border permits. Entire communities begin pitching tents on the empire's edge, and no one has the paperwork to say no. You'd think the Romans would stop it. But here's the thing: they need you. The legions are stretched thin, mostly off somewhere in Persia or Gaul, trying to keep rebellions at bay. Plagues have thinned their ranks. Taxes weigh heavier than helmets. They've started looking at you not as threats, but as resources, bodies, swords, young men with nothing to lose. So they make a deal. Foedus. That's Latin for treaty, but don't get too excited. It often translates to, "We don't trust you, but we're desperate." The Romans start letting whole tribes cross the borders in exchange for military service. They call you federati, allies, under contract. It sounds official, it sounds generous, but to you it sounds like one step closer to everything you've wanted since spotting your first Roman bridge. You're told where to live, often in underpopulated lands ruined by earlier invasions. You're given titles, dux comes even magister militum if you really impress someone important. Your tribe keeps its leaders, its language, and its gods, but you swear loyalty to Rome. Sort of. In one village, a Roman magistrate marries a Germanic woman with braided hair and teeth stained from chewing bark. They hold a ceremony with garlands and goat stew. People clap. A few years later, their grandson becomes a bishop. Still, it's not always peaceful. Not every Roman wants you here. Some call you unwashed squatters. Some resent that your children now wear Roman boots and speak Latin better than their own. And not every Germanic tribe plays nice either. One chieftain, gifted farmland in Gaul, spends more time raiding nearby Roman towns than ploughing fields. Historians still argue whether this was a betrayal or just a language barrier over what defensive perimeter meant. In the markets, your people haggle in rough Latin. One of your elders is rumored to be able to recite Cicero's speeches, though with a thick accent and frequent detours into insults. The Romans laugh, then they stop laughing when he out-argues the local judge. Somewhere along the Rhine, a Germanic girl learns to write her name in Roman script. She signs it on a wall with charcoal. A few years later, she signs her name on a marriage contract. The man she marries is a Roman citizen whose grandfather once fought her people in a swamp. That irony completely lost on them. As this mingling continues, you realize something strange. The border doesn't feel like a wall anymore. It feels like a blur, a space where tribes settle without leaving, where Rome spreads without controlling. And while some senators in the capital mutter about decline, others are busy renting villas to Germanic warlords with coin to spare. Your leaders now travel to Roman cities to negotiate. They're still barefoot, still loud, but they ride horses with Roman saddles and speak in terms the emperors understand. Sometimes they're invited into the Senate chambers, sometimes they show up uninvited and leave with a treaty anyway. The lines are blurring everywhere. Someone even jokes that the next emperor might be blonde. And you sit at a wooden table in a Roman town you couldn't pronounce 10 years ago. You eat stew with lentils. You argue about grain prices. You've never owned a tunic until now. Your uncle, once a raider, is now a landholder. Your cousin, joined a Roman legion and came back with stories of Alexandria and gold. You've traded the wild freedom of the forest for the slower, tangled rhythms of empire life. But every so often, someone in your village sharpens a blade a little too eagerly. Someone drinks too much and talks about the old days, the proud days, the violent days. You wonder how long this balance will last. You've arrived, you're inside the walls, and while some Romans still call you guest, you've started to rearrange the furniture. You're standing in line to get paid, and it's not in sacks of grain this time, it's actual coin-minted silver, stamped with a tired emperor's face whose name you still can't pronounce. You grip the purse with calloused hands and wonder how you got here, enrolled in Rome's military, wearing their mail, carrying their standard, marching not against them but for them. You, a Germanic warrior, sworn to defend Rome's borders from you, guested other Germanic warriors. Your chieftain now carries a Roman title, comes Rei Militaris, which means something like guy in charge of yelling and hitting people. It sounds more dignified in Latin. Rome has been recruiting your people for decades now, not because they want to, but because they have to. The empire is creaking under its own weight. Its original Italian heartland can no longer fill the legions, so emperors start pulling from wherever they can, Pannonia, Moesia, and yes, your muddy corner of the world. In return, they offer land citizenship titles. They call you federati. And while it sounds polite, it really just means, we hope you don't kill us if we pay you on time. Historians still argue whether this arrangement was diplomacy or bribery, dressed in bureaucracy. You're not sure either, but hey, the wine flows freely and no one's trying to crucify you, so progress. As one of Rome's new barbarian allies, you find yourself posted at the Limes, the frontier. You guard the empire from invaders who look a lot like your cousins. One day you spot a raiding party across the river and realize you know one of them. He used to share bread with you, now he's sharpening a spear. You raise the alarm anyway. A job's a job. Back at camp you sit around the fire with a strange mix of people. A Roman officer with thinning hair tells you he once served in Egypt. A Sarmatian scout throws dried figs at a Saxon who keeps quoting Virgil badly. A Moorish archer hums a lullaby from a place you've never heard of. It's a mosaic of cultures like Rome itself, only now the mosaic's held together with chewing gum and good intentions. Your tent is no longer made of hides, but woven canvas, and it comes with a rickety cot and actual straw insulation. You read orders on wax tablets or pretend to. You've learned to march in formation, take orders in Latin, and build forts faster than some Roman engineers. When your unit wins a skirmish, you celebrate with both Roman wine and Germanic songs, your voice hoarse. Your feet blistered, your heart a little confused. Some Romans sneer, of course. They call you half-Roman, which is their polite way of saying, not quite us. Others fear you'll rise up, that your loyalty is just a paycheck away from mutiny. You hear whispers in the baths, why are we letting these savages inside the walls? But when their towns get attacked, guess who they send for? That's right, you and your big terrifying friends from across the Rhine. It's not all military service, though. Many of your kin settle deeper inside the empire. Farmland gets divided among tribal elders. Entire communities sprout up near Roman towns, complete with market squares, intermarriages, and occasionally awkward bilingual plays at the local amphitheater. One Germanic kid even writes terrible poetry in Latin. His teacher weeps with pride and pain. There's a bishop now in your settlement. A former Roman soldier turned holy man. He preaches peace and warns that heaven doesn't accept bribes. You're not sure about that, but his bread is excellent. A few of your relatives get baptized more for the free robes than the theology. Still, the rituals are beautiful incense, Latin chants. The whole thing feels important, eternal. You start to wonder if maybe there's more to Rome than just roads and taxes. Meanwhile, your chieftain grows more Roman by the day. He starts issuing orders in Latin and decorates his hut with mosaic tiles liberated from a villa last year. He commissions a ring with an imperial eagle on it. Sometimes he tries to quote Cicero, although his accent makes it sound like a drunken rooster. But don't be fooled. Just beneath the surface, tensions simmer. The pay doesn't always come on time. Promised land turns out to be swampland. Some Roman officials treat your people like second-class citizens, if they even consider you citizens at all. And in a few cities, Germanic troops riot over food shortages. Roman governors' panic walls are hastily repaired, and suddenly everyone remembers the barbarian problem. Historians still debate if Rome was integrating your people or just stuffing sand into a leaking boat. Was it tolerance or desperation? Was this cultural fusion or quiet invasion? You live in that grey area, serving Rome, living within it, reshaping it from the inside. You walk into a Roman forum one evening and watch two young boys play with wooden swords. One speaks Latin, the other Old High German. They duel, then laugh, then switch languages like it's no big deal. One of them might grow up to be a bishop, the other a warlord, or maybe both. This is Rome now, this is your world. And somewhere in the distance, beyond the villas and temples, the forest still waits, wild, unbroken, whispering reminders of who you were before all this began. But tonight you're not listening. You've got Roman boots to polish and maybe a promotion on the horizon. You don't remember exactly when the sky started burning, but you remember the sound, the hiss of refugees moving like wind-blown leaves across the Danube, the sobs of children wrapped in furs, the endless murmur of prayers to gods both old and new. Word spreads quickly, even without messengers. The Huns are coming. You've heard of them, horse ghosts from the steppe arrows that fall like rain faces weathered into masks of fury. No one's entirely sure where they came from or why they seem so angry. Historians still argue whether they were driven by drought politics or just an appetite for chaos. What matters to you is that they're coming west, and fast. The Visigoths appear at the Roman frontier in waves, their leaders pleading for asylum. You're there when they arrive, thousands of people with carts, goats, and absolutely no patience. They're not there to trade or serve, they're there to survive. The Emperor Valens, ruling from Constantinople with more confidence than foresight, makes a classic Roman mistake. He says yes. In theory, this is a humanitarian act. In practice, it's an administrative train wreck. The Roman bureaucracy, already stretched, can't handle the sudden influx. Corrupt officials demand bribes for food. Promised land isn't delivered. Hungry and humiliated, the Visigoths wait and wait. And when waiting turns to rage, they stop waiting altogether. You're stationed in Thrace when it happens. The Battle of Adrianople, 378 CE. It's a hot day. The Roman legions line up in neat rows. Shields gleam, orders are barked. And then the Visigothic cavalry erupts like a thunderclap. They didn't come to integrate this time. They came to remind Rome that refugee and invader are sometimes the same man with different options. Valens dies in the chaos, burned, lost, or trampled, no one really knows. His body is never found. Rome, for the first time in centuries, realizes it can be outmaneuvered, outfought, outsmarted, and you watch it unfold from behind a shield wall, heart pounding, trying to figure out who exactly you're supposed to be loyal to. Rome, who pays you, or the people who speak your language and share your gods. After Adrianople, things don't so much collapse as smolder. The Eastern Roman Empire, centered in Constantinople, licks its wounds and tightens its borders. But the West begins to fray. In the years that follow, more tribes cross in greater numbers: Ostrogoths, Suebi Alans, Franks, Vandals. Some come as allies, others as opportunists. All of them, however, stay. The Visigoths, under a brooding and brilliant leader named Alaric, start carving out their place. Alaric once served in the Roman army. He knows how Rome thinks. He knows its roads, its supply chains, its weaknesses. But he's not after destruction, not at first. He wants recognition, a homeland, maybe even a nice Roman title. He marches his people up and down Italy, demanding what he believes they've earned. The Senate in Ravenna dithers. The Emperor Honorius, more concerned with his pet chickens than statecraft, doesn't really get it. Negotiations collapse. Alaric grows tired. And in 410 CE, the unimaginable happens. You walk through the gates of Rome with Alaric's army. No grand siege machines, no battering rams, just the perfect cocktail of famine, fear, and betrayal. The gates are opened from within by slaves or sympathizers. The Eternal City is sacked for the first time in 800 years. You don't destroy everything. This isn't a cartoonish barbarian raid. Temples are mostly spared. Churches are respected, especially the ones under St. Peter's name. But palaces are looted. Gold is carried out in sacks. Statues are toppled. A senator begs for mercy in Greek, but your comrade only speaks Gothic. He doesn't answer. He just walks away with the man's silver candelabra. You find yourself in the Forum at dawn, staring at the ruins. The marble is still warm from fire. The crows haven't even arrived yet. And you realize something strange. It doesn't feel like victory. It feels like inheritance. Rome isn't gone, it's just passed into new hands. Yours. After the sack, Alaric dies suddenly. Some say illness, some whisper poison. His men bury him in a riverbed, then kill the slaves who did the digging. The exact spot is still unknown, a grave hidden beneath moving water. A fitting end for the man who unmoored Rome from its illusions. Now the Visigoths don't leave. They settle in Gaul and later Hispania. They start collecting taxes, building courts, translating Latin laws into Gothic. One nobleman even writes a grammar textbook to help his kids learn both languages. Germanic accent, Roman syntax. It's weird. It works. And you're no longer a guest in the empire. You're part of the furniture. You wear Roman boots, swear fealty to a Roman emperor, but you drink to Alaric's ghost and teach your children Gothic war songs. You've stopped asking if you belong. You've started acting like you do. The sack of Rome was not the end. It was the opening act of a much stranger play. The barbarians weren't at the gates. They were already inside redecorating. You ride slowly through the ashes of an empire that still doesn't realize it's burning. The year is 411, maybe 412. Honestly, the calendars have started slipping. And you're deep in southern Gaul, where the vineyards still grow despite the war. Roman villas sit half empty. Some were abandoned. Some were taken. One has a new wooden fence out front and a distinctly Gothic chieftain drying fish on the veranda. You nod as you pass. He nods back. No one brings up the sack of Rome anymore. That was 2 winters ago. Things have shifted. Alaric is gone, but his people remain. They drift westward like smoke from a fire no one put out, settling in Aquitaine, then Hispania. Their new king Ataulf makes an unusual move. He marries a Roman princess, Galla Placidia, sister of Emperor Honorius. It's not exactly a Disney wedding. She'd been a hostage, then a guest, then a queen. Historians still argue whether she loved him or just learned to survive him. But for a moment it seems like Rome and the Goths might finally intertwine, without burning each other to the ground. Meanwhile, in North Africa, another story unfolds. The Vandals, yes, those Vandals, take a wildly scenic route from Germania through Gaul, then Spain, then across the Strait of Gibraltar. You'd think with a name like that they'd be cartoon villain, but the truth is more nuanced. They're not senseless destroyers, they're pragmatic opportunists. Their leader, Genseric, has one eye, one crown, and apparently infinite patience. You hear tales from returning merchants. Carthage, once Roman jewel, is now Vandal headquarters. Genseric turns it into a naval hub, outfitting ships, levying taxes, organizing pirate raids with bureaucratic precision. It's less a collapse and more of a hostile acquisition. The Vandals even issue coins. Good ones. You might not love them, but they're stable and the ships run on time. Back in Italy, Rome itself limps on more symbol than state. The Western Empire survives mostly on inertia and paperwork. A new emperor here, a new general there. Most of the real power rests with generals like Stilicho, half Vandal himself, and later Aetius, who becomes known as the last of the Romans. You admire Aetius. He's clever, brutal when necessary, and speaks your language literally. He once lived as a hostage among the Huns. You attend a war council where someone jokes that every Roman general now needs to have at least one barbarian uncle. Nobody laughs. It's too accurate. Meanwhile, Germanic warlords continue to collect Roman titles like souvenir spoons, Duke of this, Master of that. Your own cousin now calls himself Comes Africae. He still eats with his hands. Cultural blending becomes increasingly weird and wonderful. Roman aristocrats start hunting with Gothic war dogs. Germanic chiefs build Roman-style bathhouses. One bishop begins preaching sermons in a hybrid Latin-Germanic dialect that makes older clergymen weep into their manuscripts. The kids understand it just fine. You start noticing how the old Roman habits cling even to those who supposedly replaced them. The Visigoths hold councils modelled after the Roman Senate. The Burgundians write a law code, Lex Gundebarda, that's basically Roman law, but with more axes. The Vandals even adopt Arian Christianity, a heretical branch in Rome's eyes, but organised and scripturally rigorous. These are not the wild men from Tacitus' fever dreams. These are empire builders. Just not the original model. You visit a court in Toulouse and hear a case argued entirely in Latin. The judge is a Visigoth. The defendant is a Roman merchant. The accusation, tax evasion. Some things never change. And what of the people, the ordinary farmers, bakers, smiths? Most adapt. A few still complain in dark corners of taverns, but they're mostly just upset about grain prices. You meet an old Roman widow who remembers when legions patrolled these roads. Now her grandsons wear Gothic brooches and drink mead from horn cups. She shrugs. They still kiss my cheek, she says. That's Roman enough for me. You hear rumours from the east. Constantinople still glittering, still calling itself Rome. They watch what's happening in the west with a mixture of pity and strategic silence. They send envoys, sometimes always late, always vague. You suspect they're hoping the problem solves itself. You're not sure it won't. One night you sit beneath a crumbling aqueduct staring at the stars. A fellow soldier offers you wine. He's half Roman, half Frank, and fully convinced he's the future. The empire isn't falling, he says. It's just changing uniforms. You smile. Maybe he's right. But deep inside you know what's coming. The real end hasn't arrived yet. But the people who'll bring it, they're already inside the house. You lean back, sip your wine, and watch the embers drift into the night. The road you march on now was built by Roman hands centuries ago, each stone laid with mathematical care, each milestone carved to remind you who ruled this land. But today your boots tread lightly, because while the road is Roman, the men walking it are not. You're part of a new expeditionary force, only this one flies no imperial eagle. Instead, your leader is Genseric, king of the Vandals, and your destination is Rome. Again, it's been a few decades since Alaric's famed visit and the city has been rebuilt, sort of. But it still whispers its scars. The people have returned, the statues have been mended, but the old confidence is gone. And now, in 455 CE, the Vandals are arriving, not as visitors, not even as angry in-laws, but as professional looters with a logistical plan. Genseric has been invited technically by Empress Licinia Eudoxia, who may or may not have been coerced into it after the murder of her husband, Emperor Valentinian III. It's complicated, this century always is. You sail with Genseric's fleet, watching the Italian coast approach, waves black beneath their hulls. When you arrive, there's no real resistance. The gates swing open with more resignation than panic. The city is sacked again, but like last time, it's not senseless. Genseric orders his men not to burn, not to kill indiscriminately. It's a looting, not a bloodbath. Church treasures are carried off with surprising reverence. One bishop reportedly negotiates with the Vandals in fluent Gothic and earns a nod of respect. Historians still debate whether this sack was more violent than Alaric's or just better organized. You carry out a golden statue of Mars and wonder if anyone even remembers what that god was for anymore. This time the impact is different. People across the empire start muttering the word collapse. The West is hemorrhaging control. The Eastern Empire, still ruled from Constantinople, watches, warily issuing diplomatic frowns, but not much else. They're busy with their own drama-theological debates, Persian skirmishes and chariot racing riots that make modern football fans look restrained. After the sack, Genseric returns to Carthage, and you follow him back across the sea. There, life in Vandal Africa is strangely civilized. The aqueducts work, the olive groves bloom, The coins bear your king's name, but the architecture remains stubbornly Roman. Genseric tolerates Roman administrators and tax collectors so long as they pledge loyalty and don't get ideas. Latin is still spoken in court. Bread is still distributed. Even the amphitheatre occasionally hosts plays, though they've replaced Roman tragedies with tales of Gothic glory. You settle in Carthage and for a while things are good. You have a house with a tiled roof. Your children attend lessons taught by an old Roman scholar who once worked in the imperial archives. He grumbles but teaches anyway. Your son learns to recite Virgil, your daughter copies out Augustine. You pretend not to notice how Roman your life has become. But Rome, the idea of Rome isn't done yet. Across the Alps, a general named Aetius still fights to hold the center. He's forged uneasy alliances with various tribes, including yours. Aetius is known as the last Roman, though his ancestry is a mix of Scythian and Roman, and his army includes more barbarians than citizens. Still, he's a tactician, charismatic, unyielding. You serve under him during a campaign against Attila the Hun, and for once, the Germanic tribes unite not against Rome, but for it. The Battle of the Catalonian Plains in 451 is something you'll never forget. Dust blood, the thunder of hooves. Attila's Huns clash with Aetius's coalition army, which includes Visigoths, Franks, and Roman troops. You're somewhere in the middle, swinging a sword made in a Roman forge, while screaming war chants older than Julius Caesar. The battle ends inconclusively, but Attila retreats. For once, Rome is not the loser. For once, your side wins whatever your side means anymore. But triumph doesn't last. Aetius is murdered by Emperor Valentinian III, who himself is assassinated not long after. There are no more heroes left, just survivors. The Western Empire slides into a cycle of puppet emperors, military coups, and increasingly embarrassing diplomatic letters sent to the East. You hear stories of Roman senators now acting more like local nobles, managing estates and bribing soldiers to keep bandits away. The bureaucracy continues like a machine running on phantom power. Tax records are still filed even when the tax collectors have left town. Bishops become the only recognizable authority in many cities. One even starts minting coins with his face on them. You ride through Gaul one spring and find that the local comes is a Burgundian prince who reads Augustine and hosts dinner parties with amphora wine. He plays the lyre, sings half in Latin, half in Germanic, and asks you what it's like to have seen Rome fall twice. You answer it hasn't fallen, it's just taking a very long nap. In the marketplaces, children sell charms of St. Alaric next to faded busts of Caesar. No one sees the irony, or maybe everyone does and they're just too tired to care. The Vandals continue to raid Mediterranean coasts, not out of malice, but because it's profitable. One Vandal pirate builds a villa on the Balearic Islands with a pool and a library. You visit him once. His favorite scroll, a Latin manual on how to discipline soldiers. Still works, he says, pouring you wine. You look around and realize you're no longer part of a transitional phase. This isn't an interruption in Roman history. This is Roman history now. Germanic kings with Roman names, Latin poets writing under Gothic patrons, barbarian generals arguing about imperial succession with more decorum than the Senate ever managed. You once thought you were joining something mighty. Now you see you're helping build something new, messy hybrid, stubbornly alive. You sit on a stone wall watching a boy in a tattered tunic chase a pig through what used to be the courtyard of a Roman garrison. The vines have crept up over the mosaic floor. The columns lean like old men, but the pig seems delighted. This is the world now, not quite broken, just rearranged. The legions no longer march from town to town, but the roads are still there. The language still echoes in the churches, and if you squint, you can still see the bones of the old empire beneath the dust. The Huns are gone. Attila died in his sleep after a wedding feast in 453, possibly from a nosebleed, possibly from poison, or if you ask some people, a curse. Historians still argue about that one naturally. His sons squabble and fail to hold the empire together. Like a storm, the Huns vanish as quickly as they arrived, leaving behind only wreckage and a lot of nervous rebuilding. But the damage is done. The Gothic kingdoms are now permanent fixtures. The Franks settle in northern Gaul under the young and ambitious Childeric, and his son Clovis will one day make everyone pay attention. The Burgundians, meanwhile, are busy composing legal codes with names that sound like battle cries. Even the Ostrogoths, once enslaved by the Huns, are beginning to rise in the east, eyeing Italy with a mixture of vengeance and architectural ambition. You find yourself caught in the middle again, somewhere between soldier and farmer Roman, and not proud and exhausted. You visit Ravenna, the new capital of the Western Empire, though calling it a capital feels generous. It's a marshy, humid place with more mosaics than money, but it clings to life. The emperors who live there change too fast for anyone to remember. One boy emperor is so young he rides a hobby horse while his ministers write decrees in his name. The real power now lies with men like Ricimer, a Germanic general of Suebic descent, technically loyal to the empire but effectively its puppet master. Ricimer installs and removes emperors like changing tunics. You meet him once at a military review. His Latin is flawless, his armor polished, his smile paper-thin. You're not sure whether to salute or spit. Elsewhere, Odoacer, a rising Ostrogothic commander, is building a reputation. You hear his name whispered in taverns, then printed in letters, then shouted from balconies. He serves under the empire for now, but no one doubts where this is going. Back in Gaul, things grow more peculiar. The Roman general Syagrius holds a pocket of land in the north and insists he's still a governor of the empire. The locals call him King of the Romans, which sounds like a compliment until you realize how small his kingdom actually is. His neighbors are all Franks, and they're not exactly sending him welcome baskets. The boy Clovis, still barely out of childhood, is sharpening his ambitions. Even further west in Britain, the Roman garrisons have long since withdrawn. What's left is a swirl of warlords, druids, collapsing villas, and the occasional whispered story of a man named Arthur, who might or might not have existed. You sail there, once curious, and find mist sheep and poetry that makes no sense, but it sticks in your mind like a dream you can't shake. The church becomes the glue. Bishops are now mayors, judges, and historians all in one. They preserve what's left of Roman law, teach Latin to children with no memory of Caesar, and arbitrate disputes between illiterate kings. You attend a mass in a stone chapel built by Visigoth hands led by a Roman priest wearing Frankish boots. You can't decide whether it's hopeful or hilarious. You write a letter home on papyrus scavenged from a ruined monastery. Your handwriting is a blend of Latin cursive and Gothic rune, and you wonder if anyone will understand it 50 years from now, or care. And then comes 476 CE. You're in Italy when it happens. The last Western Roman emperor, a boy named Romulus Augustulus, is deposed by Odoacer. No grand battle, no siege. Just a letter of resignation, a general's boots on the marble floor, and the soft shuffle of an empire quietly folding itself into history. Odoacer doesn't crown himself emperor. That would be too obvious. Instead, he declares himself Rex Italiae, King of Italy, and sends the imperial regalia to Constantinople as a courtesy or perhaps a taunt. The Eastern Emperor, Zeno, nods politely and adds it to his to ignore list. You stand in the forum in Ravenna as the news spreads. Some people cry, others cheer. Most just go back to whatever they were doing. After all, how do you mourn something that's already been slowly dying for 100 years? You are not Roman, not exactly, but neither are you just a barbarian anymore. You are something new, a hybrid, a descendant of wolves and marble alike. And this world, it belongs to you now. The sun rises slower now, or maybe you're just getting older. You watch it break over the tiled rooftops of Ravenna, no longer Rome's capital, but still its memory. The city hasn't changed much since the empire was quietly folded into Odoacer's hands. The mosaics still shimmer, churches still echo with chants in Latin, and old senators still wear togas like they mean something. But the empire is gone, officially, finally. And yet, here you are, still living as if it hasn't quite accepted the fact. Odoacer rules in the emperor's chair, but he doesn't pretend to be anything other than what he is, a Germanic king in Roman clothes. You see him ride through the streets, sometimes no purple robe, no laurel crown, just a hardened face, a retinue of bodyguards with scarred arms and boots thick with dust. He's efficient, cold, and perhaps most importantly, tolerant. Latin is still the language of law. Roman landowners are left mostly alone. The Senate still exists, though their power is now purely decorative, like grapes carved into a stone fountain. You're in his service now, part of the growing administrative class that speaks both Gothic and Latin, that knows how to collect taxes and also sharpen a sword. You work from an office carved out of an old granary. Your clerk is a former monk who keeps misquoting Livy and eats figs like they're going out of style. Your seal ring is stamped with a Roman eagle, but it was gifted to you by a Frank. Speaking of Franks, the north is boiling. Clovis has come of age and he's not wasting time. A cunning warlord in a wolfskin cloak, he understands power in a way that feels frighteningly modern. His conversion to Catholic Christianity wasn't just spiritual, it was strategic. Most of the Germanic kings have converted to Arianism, a version of Christianity that keeps getting called heretical by the Catholic bishops in Rome and Constantinople. But Clovis, he goes full Nicene Creed. And suddenly he's the poster child for legitimacy, the sword arm of the true faith. Bishops cheer, his enemies panic. You travel north on assignment and hear his name in every tavern. Clovis the clever, Clovis the anointed. He defeats Syagrius, the last Roman general in Gaul at Soissons. That's it, the last flicker of Roman military authority in the west. You watch Syagrius flee into exile, another ghost swallowed by the new order. In Spain, the Visigoths expand, consolidating their hold, issuing their own law codes that sound suspiciously Roman, but are now written in Gothic-inflected Latin. Their kings now wear gold circlets and read Roman histories before bed. In one court, you meet a Visigothic nobleman who swears by Tacitus and refuses to drink anything that wasn't imported from Africa. His wife recites psalms and wears a Roman-style stola stitched by Frankish nuns. Even the Ostrogoths scattered after the fall of the Huns are beginning to rally. Theodoric, tall, magnetic Ostrogothic royalty with a Roman education, is rising fast. He spent his youth in Constantinople as a hostage, and he learned everything Greek, Latin, politics, chess. He returns to his people like a myth reborn. By 488, Emperor Zeno in the east sees an opportunity to kill two birds with one crown. He sends Theodoric west to depose Odoacer. It's a calculated gamble, get rid of one Germanic strongman by sending in another, ideally one who still pretends to respect Roman tradition. The campaign lasts years. You're there when Theodoric marches into Italy, not with destruction in mind, but with a blueprint. He wants what Odoacer built, but bigger, sharper, more his. They battle, they negotiate, they parley. Odoacer retreats to Ravenna and holds out for years until a truce is brokered. At the victory banquet in 493, Theodoric kills Odoacer with his own hand, slices him in half, according to one dramatic source. Historians still argue whether that detail is metaphor, exaggeration, or simply very on-brand for the era. Now it's Theodoric's turn, and here's where it gets really interesting. He doesn't become emperor, he rules as Rex Italiae, king of Italy, but insists he's just governing on behalf of the emperor. In the East, it's a polite fiction, no one believes it. But it gives him cover to restore what feels like a Roman state without needing to wear the imperial purple. The Senate survives, taxes are collected, roads are repaired, aqueducts flow again. You walk through a restored market and buy olives with coins bearing Theodoric's profile, clean-shaven, crowned, thoroughly imperial. His court is a masterpiece of compromise. Roman aristocrats serve alongside Gothic warriors. Civil law is Roman, military authority is Gothic. You once attend a banquet where a Latin philosopher argues with a Gothic chieftain about the shape of the soul, and they toast afterward with wine from Sicily. You start to believe maybe this could work. Maybe the Roman experiment hasn't ended, just rebooted. But cracks remain. Tensions simmer between the Catholic Roman majority and their Arian Gothic overlords. The Church walks a delicate line, one sermon away from disaster. And always there's Constantinople watching, commenting, occasionally poking at the fragile balance from afar. Still, for now, things hold. You serve in Theodoric's bureaucracy, marveling at how many old Roman customs live on in this strange new kingdom. Children recite Virgil in classrooms funded by Gothic taxes. Senators debate water rights while Gothic bodyguards sip mead outside the forum. It's bizarre, it's beautiful, it's barely holding together, but you know better than to count on permanence. You've seen enough of history to recognize the rhythm. The moment you start to relax, something shifts. A betrayal, a famine, a new emperor with something to prove. But for now, in this brief, glittering moment, you can almost believe that Rome didn't fall. It just found a new name on the lease. The parchment crackles in your hands as you unroll another imperial edict, written in Latin, sealed in wax, and signed by a Gothic king who still insists he's acting for the good of the Roman people. You smirk at the phrase. You've seen more barbarian haircuts in the Senate lately than you've seen Roman togas. And yet Rome lives. It breathes, stumbles, and keeps filing taxes, even when the palace roof leaks. You're part of its afterlife now, equal parts administrator and archaeologist, navigating a world still obsessed with pretending it hasn't changed. Theodoric's reign in Italy settles into something alarmingly stable. His capital in Ravenna gleams. Public buildings are repaired. Statues are cleaned. Even the gladiator games are revived, briefly sanitized, of course, for Christian tastes. You attend one where nobody dies and everyone claps politely. It's a far cry from the roaring Colosseum days, but the idea lives on, just gentler and better dressed. You witness Gothic nobles slowly transform. No longer fur-cloaked warriors swinging axes in muddy forests, they now wear silk, quote, Cicero, and write letters lamenting the moral decline of the youth. One Gothic aristocrat you meet keeps a bust of Augustus in his dining room and refers to him as our father. You don't have the heart to point out the lineage gap. In Visigothic Spain you see a similar metamorphosis. The Codex Euricianus, a law code issued by King Euric, tries to blend Gothic tribal laws with Roman legal tradition. It's clunky, occasionally contradictory, but it works. At least it works better than open warfare. You attend a court case in Toledo where a Roman landowner pleads his case before a Gothic judge. The judge listens, nods, consults a dusty Roman legal manual, then issues a ruling that's half legalese, half personal anecdote. The landowner bows and leaves, satisfied. It's not justice in the old sense, but it's something. The Franks under Clovis, meanwhile, are getting bolder. With the church firmly on his side, Clovis is carving out a northern empire dressed up as Christian virtue. He defeats the Alemanni, the Visigoths, and any unlucky Roman holdout who hasn't figured out the new rules. He's crowned by bishops anointed with oil, praised as a new Constantine. His coinage features crosses. His laws begin to echo Roman formulas. But the moustache remains very Frankish. And then there's the Eastern Empire, still calling itself Roman, still dressing like it's 200 CE, still sending letters filled with passive-aggressive flattery. Constantinople thrives while the West recycles. Its emperors, from Zeno to Anastasius to Justin, treat their Western cousins with a mixture of disdain and cautious indulgence. You once read a diplomatic dispatch from Constantinople that refers to Theodoric as a loyal servant of the Roman order, while also strongly implying he should stop appointing bishops. Theodoric in turn builds more aqueducts and ignores the suggestion. One day you visit Rome itself again, the city of hills and ghosts. It's quieter now, its population a fraction of what it once was, but it still astonishes. The Pantheon still stands. The Senate building is cracked but used for occasional ceremonies. The Forum is part grazing ground, part open-air classroom. Children chase goats over what used to be the rostra, and a monk lectures on Cicero next to a collapsed temple. And in that same Rome the Pope grows stronger. With every political vacuum, the Bishop of Rome fills the silence. He negotiates with kings, arbitrates disputes, organizes grain distributions. In many people's eyes, he is Rome now, not a soldier, not a senator, but a shepherd in a simple robe, holding the city together with parchment and prayer. You sit one evening in a Roman tavern that used to be a senator's villa. The wine is still decent, though the amphorae are chipped. You speak with a group of scribes, one Visigothic, one Roman, one Frankish. They all argue over the best way to conjugate a Latin verb. You laugh quietly. This is the world now, barbarian kings who read Roman histories before bed, Roman priests preaching to Gothic soldiers, and bureaucrats like you caught in the middle, stamping documents that bear imperial symbols and no one quite believes in anymore. But still, no one stops writing the dates in the year of the consul. Even if there are no more consuls, the fiction continues because the fiction matters. It's not a lie, it's a bridge. You realize that now. What you are living through isn't a collapse, it's a transformation. The empire has become a ghost that still shapes the living, in law, in language, in stone. Even when the structures fall, the habits remain. Roads are still repaired, titles still matter. Latin is still the language of law, learning and complaint. A Frankish boy quotes Virgil at his tutor, a Gothic bishop preaches with a Roman cadence. A Vandal sailor sings a hymn written in North African Latin. The empire is everywhere but nowhere, dead but breathing through new lungs. You rise from your seat and step into the Roman night, the stars blinking above like an ancient ceiling fresco. Somewhere out there, new kingdoms are rising. But they're rising on Roman foundations, even if they don't know it. And as you pass beneath an archway carved centuries ago, you wonder not whether Rome still exists, but whether it ever really stopped. You wake to the sound of bells, soft, slow measured. Not a Roman trumpet or a Gothic war horn, but the chime of monastery bells calling the faithful to prayer. Its early mist still clings to the ground, and the world feels hushed, as if it too is waiting for something. You step outside your lodging in the foothills near Ravenna, a place where once imperial guards patrolled, and now monks quietly copy out Latin texts, their ink-stained fingers preserving words from centuries before. This is the empire now, not a military machine, not a marble-clad superpower, but a collection of memories, habits, and scripts kept alive in scrolls and sermons, coins and customs architecture and accents. You wander through a former villa now turned abbey, columns repurposed into cloisters, mosaics scrubbed of pagan gods repainted with saints. The transformation is delicate but profound. The past is being edited, not erased, and you old now no longer carry a sword but a ledger. You oversee land disputes, translate decrees, guide young scribes through the maze of Roman laws still used now, more out of tradition than necessity. One of your apprentices is a Lombard. Another is half Byzantine. Neither has seen the empire you once served, but they speak its language, quote its laws, and bow slightly when they mention the Senate. It's strange how Rome in falling has become more viral than it ever was at its height. The Franks, now fully ascendant under Clovis and his heirs, use Roman infrastructure and baptize their kings in Roman cathedrals. They mint coins bearing imperial insignias. They fight under banners modelled on Roman standards, and yet they do so as Franks, not pretending to be Roman but clearly shaped by what Rome once was. Theodoric, in his twilight years, governs from Ravenna like a philosopher king, balancing Gothic loyalty with Roman legacy. His policies maintain peace, his advisors quote Augustine and Ambrose, and his court hosts ambassadors from all corners of Europe and beyond. For a man who never wore the imperial purple, he governs with a dignity most emperors would envy. And yet even he knows it's all temporary. You hear him speak once to a gathering of Gothic nobles and Roman senators. "We are not Romans," he says, "but we have inherited their burden." The hall is silent. No one argues. Across the sea, Constantinople continues to hum with life, a mosaic of ambition and orthodoxy, bureaucracy and incense. You read of Justinian, an emperor who dreams not of maintaining Rome's memory, but of resurrecting its reality. He drafts new laws, builds the Hagia Sophia, and plots the reconquest of the West. His general Belisarius will indeed reclaim parts of North Africa and Italy for a while. You hear about it in letters, and then years later from wandering soldiers who speak of plagues, sieges and cities, retaken only to be lost again. You think about those efforts with a weary sympathy. You've seen too much to believe that Rome can be put back together again, like a dropped amphora. It's not a thing anymore, it's a language, a myth, a code of conduct. It's in the way cities are laid out, in the shape of letters, in the logic of law. Even as the borders fracture and new peoples rise, they carry bits of Rome with them like pollen on the wind. In Iberia, the Visigoths hold fast to their kingdom. They codify law, support churches, argue theology. In Gaul, the Merovingians intermarry with Gallo-Roman elites, and their courts become a blend of fir and silk horn and lyre. In the British Isles, petty kings name their sons with Latin endings and build hill forts with roads they don't quite understand. All across Europe, what emerges isn't a clean break from Rome. It's a messy sprawl of imitation, innovation, and inertia. Even you find yourself caught in it. One evening, you write a legal ruling that cites both Roman precedent and Gothic tradition, and you don't even realize the blend until you reread it. It feels natural now, as if the centuries have blurred into a new kind of logic. A law that isn't Roman or barbarian, but both, or something else entirely. Your grandchildren don't know the Rome you knew. They've never seen an imperial procession, never heard Latin shouted in the streets, but they still bow before statues wear brooches stamped with eagles and quote proverbs in Latin during mealtime prayers. They live in a world Rome built even if they've never seen it. And now, as twilight settles over the hills, you sit in the doorway of your modest villa, once a Roman granary, now your home, and listen to the bells once more. Somewhere down the road a rider passes. You catch a glimpse of his shield, an old Roman eagle painted beside a Gothic rune. The world is not what it was, but then it never really was what it thought it was either. And as night comes, you breathe deep, grateful that you were there to see it, not the fall of Rome, but its transformation into something stranger, quieter, and still alive. So now, as the story rests, let your thoughts slow with it. Picture those mosaic halls flickering with lamplight fading into shadow as the last scribes tuck away their parchments. The roads you've marched are now empty, soft with moss, bordered by silent columns that once heard the footsteps of senators, soldiers, and wanderers like you. The empire has changed hands, changed names, and changed languages, but the stones still remember. Let the echoes of Gothic chants and Latin prayers blend in your ears like wind through ancient arches. Imagine the distant chiming of church bells growing faint as you drift away farther from war horses and border forts, closer to sleep. The weight of armor of duty of memory lifts slowly from your shoulders. What remains is the hush of history, thousands of voices layered through time, now gently fading into silence. You did not watch Rome end. You watched it ripple, its ideas taking new forms, its marble heart cracked but not hollowed. Even now, in this final breath, it lives in the cadence of a prayer, the curve of a letter, the shape of a dream. So let yourself rest now. You've walked far through battlefields and basilicas, through forests and forums. You've seen kingdoms rise not from ash, but from imitation, and you've earned the quiet. Close your eyes, let the lamps dim, let the marble cool, let history pause. Good night, traveler.